I'm 27 male, first-gen college student, worked 2 jobs through undergrad, scraped together enough financial aid to get through a master's program in computer science at a state university in Ohio. No family money, no safety net, no backup plan. Just me, my laptop, and 5 years of grinding toward a degree that was supposed to change my entire life. My girlfriend and I had been together for 3 years. She moved in 8 months before everything fell apart. Early on, she was great, funny, warm, the kind of person you're glad to come home to. But around month 4 of living together, things started shifting. Small stuff at first. She'd spend her portion of the rent on a weekend trip and expect me to cover the difference. She'd make plans involving my car, my credit card, my time, without asking. When I brought it up, she'd turn it into a lecture about how I was too rigid and needed to learn to enjoy life. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad. I was wrong. My thesis had taken 2.5 years to build. It was a full machine learning pipeline, predictive modeling for hospital resource allocation. Real data, IRB approved, partnered with an actual hospital network. My advisor called it publishable. My department chair flagged it for a university-wide research award. It was the most important thing I had ever built, and I treated it that way. I kept it backed up in 3 places: the laptop's local drive, an external hard drive in my desk drawer, and a cloud backup service I'd been paying for since undergrad out of pure habit. That habit saved my life. The week before my submission deadline, I was in brutal mode. 16-hour days, barely leaving my desk. My girlfriend had been complaining that I was checked out of the relationship. I told her I was on deadline. She said every week was a deadline with me. I said yes, this one has a fixed date and real consequences if I miss it. She didn't take that well, but I didn't have the bandwidth to manage it right then. On a Tuesday evening, I left to meet my advisor at the university library for a final review session. Maybe 2 hours, tops. I left my laptop on my desk the way I always did, open, charging, right where it always sat. When I got home, the desk was empty. I checked my bag, the kitchen counter, every surface in the apartment. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed. Her text said, "I accidentally threw out your laptop. Oops." I was doing a big clean, and it ended up in the trash. The truck already came. "Sorry, babe," grimacing face. I read it 3 times. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and stayed very still for about a minute. My thesis. My data. 2.5 years of work. Due in 72 hours. Here's the thing. My first instinct was to call her and say everything building up in my chest. But I stopped. Because something about that text didn't sit right. She had texted instead of called. She used the word oops. She put an emoji at the end. Nobody who genuinely, accidentally destroys the most important thing in their partner's life sends an emoji. I typed back. Accidents happen. 3 words. Sent it. Phone face down. Then I opened my cloud backup portal. Everything was there. Every file, every folder, every version, timestamped and intact. All 340 pages of code, documentation, and research data. I downloaded the entire thing to an old backup laptop I kept in my closet and spent the next 60 hours doing final edits, formatting citations, and prepping the submission package. I slept maybe 4 hours total. I submitted the thesis 18 hours before the deadline. But I was not done. While I was grinding through those final hours, my phone was lighting up. She came home the next morning acting completely normal. Asked if I wanted coffee. I said no thanks and kept working. She stood in the doorway, looked at me hunched over the old laptop, and I watched something shift in her expression. Not guilt. Something more like recalculation. "I thought you didn't have your thesis anymore," she said slowly. "Cloud backup," I said. Didn't look up. Silence for a beat too long. Then, "Oh, that's lucky." Lucky. Right. Over the next 2 days, watching her try to manage the situation was genuinely something. She started by suggesting I had probably overreacted about the laptop. Then she said she'd actually done me a favor by cleaning up. Then she escalated to saying I was so obsessed with school that it was damaging the relationship, and that if I had paid more attention to her, she wouldn't have felt the need to reorganize. There it was, buried in a grievance speech. She wouldn't have felt the need. I didn't engage. I nodded, said I heard her, went back to my screen. I had already started making calls. The day after I submitted, I contacted a data recovery firm through a referral from one of my CS professors. I explained the situation. A laptop discarded without consent, containing research data, 72-hour deadline. I asked them to document what professional emergency recovery would have cost for that specific model, an encrypted SSD drive on an expedited timeline. They sent me a formal written estimate, $8,900. I had it notarized the same week. Then I called a civil attorney who handled property damage and tenant disputes. I laid out the facts. My girlfriend was on the lease as a co-tenant. She had disposed of my personal property, a laptop valued around $1,400, without my consent. The data on it, if unrecoverable, would have caused direct and documentable academic and professional harm. The cloud backup meant I hadn't actually lost the data, but the act itself, intentionally or not, was still destruction of personal property under Ohio law. The attorney was straightforward about it. In Ohio, destruction of another person's property, even between people living together, can constitute criminal damaging under ORC 2909.06. That's a second-degree misdemeanor for property under $1,000, but the surrounding circumstances and consequential damages affect the civil picture significantly. He said the notarized recovery estimate was exactly the right move. Then he asked, "Do you still have her text?" I had screenshotted it within 30 seconds of receiving it. Time-stamped. Already backed up in 2 places. "Good," he said. "Let's talk about what you want to do." I sent her the invoice on a Friday morning. Printed on paper, formal header, fully itemized, the notarized recovery estimate attached, a summary letter from my attorney explaining the legal basis. 60-day payment window before formal civil proceedings. I set it under her coffee mug while she was scrolling her phone at the kitchen table. She picked it up. Read the first line. Looked at me. "What is this?" "Invoice. For the data recovery services that would have been required if I hadn't had cloud backup." She stared. "You're joking." "I'm not. You had the backup. You didn't lose anything." "The attempt was made," I said. "Legal exposure doesn't disappear, because I was prepared." That's when everything detonated. She stood up, crumpled the invoice, actually crumpled it with both hands, and threw it at my chest. "You cannot sue me. I live here. I'm your girlfriend. It was an accident." "Your text used that word," I said. "My attorney finds it interesting that you texted instead of called. That you said oops. That you came home the next morning surprised I still had my files. Are you calling me a liar? I'm sending you a civil invoice. What you call yourself is your business." She grabbed her phone and went to her room. I could hear her in there for 2 hours straight, talking to someone. I later found out she had called her mother, her best friend, and a guy she'd apparently been texting for the prior 6 weeks. That last part came out later in a way I didn't see coming. What followed was a full-scale campaign to pressure me into dropping it. Her mother called me first. Said I was weaponizing the legal system against a young woman. Said her daughter was sensitive, and I was destroying her mental health over a laptop. I told her the matter was being handled through civil channels, and I wasn't in a position to discuss it further. She threatened to make sure everyone knew what kind of person I was. I thanked her for the call and hung up. Then came the mutual friends. A group chat I'd been in for 2 years suddenly had a lot of opinions about my vindictive behavior. Someone said sending an invoice to a girlfriend was financial abuse. I left the group chat. Screenshotted the messages first. Then she tried the soft approach. Came to me one evening, completely different energy, quiet, apologetic, said she knew she'd made a mistake, said she wanted to work through everything. And then, almost like an afterthought, "Can we just tear up the invoice? Start fresh." I told her I appreciated the apology. The invoice stood. The softness was gone in about 4 seconds. Her next move was going to my university. She filed a complaint with the graduate school's student conduct office claiming I was harassing and intimidating her as retaliation for a household dispute. The conduct officer called me in. I brought the printed text, my response, the attorney letter, the invoice, and a written timeline of every interaction since the laptop disappeared. The conduct officer read through the whole thing quietly, then looked up and asked if anything in the documentation fell outside a standard civil legal process. I said no. The complaint was dismissed within a week. Insufficient evidence of misconduct. When she found out, she stopped paying rent. Just stopped. Said she didn't feel safe in the apartment and was being constructively forced to consider leaving. I documented the missed payment. My attorney sent a written notice of lease obligation, and she paid the following week, absolutely furious about it. And then the thing I didn't anticipate happened. My attorney, doing routine background work on the civil claim, pulled her financial history. What he found wasn't about the laptop at all. It was a small claims judgment from 2 years before I even met her. A former roommate had sued her for destruction of property after she had accidentally disposed of his equipment during a cleaning.
He won.
$600 judgment. She had paid it. It wasn't a habit.
It was a pattern.
It was a method. I sat with that for a full day. Then I called my attorney. He confirmed that under Ohio civil procedure, prior similar acts can be introduced as evidence to establish that conduct was intentional rather than negligent. The prior judgment made our case significantly stronger on the question of intent. I filed formally in Franklin County Municipal Court, Small Claims Division. The claim was $1,400 for the laptop at fair market value and $3,500 in consequential damages, a reduced figure my attorney recommended as more defensible than the full recovery estimate. Total claim, $4,900. She was served on a Wednesday afternoon. I know because she called me 11 times in 40 minutes. I let every single one go to voicemail. She found an attorney who sent a letter calling my claim retaliatory and frivolous. My attorney responded with the prior judgment documentation and noticed that we intended to submit it as evidence of pattern and intent. Her attorney withdrew from the case 2 weeks before the hearing. I don't know what was said in that conversation, but I can guess. The morning of the hearing, she walked in with her mother sitting in the gallery. She had dressed carefully and looked composed. She told the magistrate it was an accident. She was cleaning. She didn't realize the laptop was important. She was sorry. The magistrate asked her one question. Were you aware your partner was working on a deadline-sensitive academic project at the time of the incident? She paused. He was always on a deadline. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Yes. I knew he had a thesis due. The magistrate turned to my documentation. I had submitted the original text with timestamp, my attorney's letter, the notarized recovery estimate, the prior small claims judgment, and a signed letter from my academic advisor confirming the submission deadline and the significance of the thesis to my academic standing. The magistrate reviewed the prior judgment in silence for a long moment. She asked my girlfriend if she had any response to it. My girlfriend said it was completely unrelated. The magistrate noted the court found the pattern relevant to the question of intent. Judgment in my favor. $4,900 plus court filing fees. Her mother made a noise from the gallery. The magistrate reminded her that outbursts were not permitted in the courtroom. She had 30 days to pay under Ohio's small claims enforcement rules.
She didn't pay.
I filed for a garnishment order through the court, which was granted. The funds were pulled directly from her account. She called me when it hit, saying I had stolen from her. I told her the court had authorized the transaction. You ruined my life over a laptop, she said.
You made a choice, I said.
I just made sure there were consequences. She hung up. 2 months later, I defended my thesis. My committee approved it. I walked in May with a master's degree in computer science and a job offer from a healthcare analytics firm that made everything I had gone through feel like it was worth every single hour. My department chair told me after the ceremony that the thesis was being submitted for a regional research award. I thought about how close it had all come. And then I let it go. People who use accident as cover for intention rely on you being too emotional, too trusting, or too drained to push back. They count on the relationship being a shield. They count on you absorbing the cost so they don't have to.
Be calm.
Be documented. Be backed up. If this story made you feel something, hit subscribe, because apparently we both understand that the best response to oops is a court date.